Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Neuroplasticity Alliance's Therapy Innovation Summit 2022. I'm your host, Sherry Odom. You're in for a real treat today. We've got Dr. Donalee Markus joining us. She's a cognitive restructuring expert, and quite simply put, that means she teaches intelligence. Her teaching instrument of preference is the puzzle. She uses logic-based, context-free puzzles that get more complex as you go through the program. Here are a couple of samples just to give you an idea what some of these might look like. Her puzzles and process work by stimulating the brain to generate new neural pathways. And the greater the number of neural pathways an individual has, the greater of options they can rely on when trying to solve problems or generate new ideas. They work by allowing the individual to analyze their thinking process, and that enhances mental agility, which is basically increasing intelligence. Dr. Markus has been at this for over 40 years, and she's got a diverse set of puzzles to work from. And because she's using the structural elements of rewiring the brain, she's been able to help a really wide range of individuals suffering from neurological dysfunction. This includes brain injury, learning difficulties, aging brain, and even stroke. In addition to that, she's been able to create a program to help high-functioning individuals enhance their capabilities. She's used that to create corporate training programs for some of the top corporations in America, including McDonald's, Ameritech, Cooper's Lybrand, and even the rocket scientists at NASA. She's outlined all of those strategies and a lot of the puzzles she used in this book, Retrain Your Business Brain, and it's a must read for anybody who's trying to get a competitive edge. Dr. Markus's cognitive restructuring work has also been detailed in Clark Elliott's really unforgettable chronicle of recovery from brain injury in his book, The Ghost in My Brain. Dr. Markus has developed over 18,000 puzzles and has 9 digital apps that can be used by anyone at their own pleasure. And those can be found on her website, Designs for Strong Minds. Dr. Markus, thank you for joining us today. It's a real treat to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Dr. Markus, I know that one of the foundational principles for your work is that intelligence is teachable. Can you explain that a little bit for us, and then tell us why you're so passionate about it and how you came to that realization?
Certainly. I first read about teachable intelligence in Psychology Today. This Psychology Today journal, October 1981. And in there was an article by Paul Chance that talked about the Israeli scholar Reuven Feuerstein and the fact that he purported and the theoretical framework that intelligence is plastic and modifiable at any age. And I call Professor Feuerstein the father of teachable intelligence. And Feuerstein developed the tools and the technique for critical thinking. I was finishing a dissertation at Northwestern. I had 2 master's degrees. I had been teaching since I was 21, but I had never been exposed to a concept of teaching critical thinking without a domain-specific reference. In other words, I taught English, I taught history, I taught math, but Feuerstein talked about the foundation of learning how to learn, visual imagery, all of the characteristics, reducing impulsivity, all of the characteristics that cumulatively create the opportunity for analytical and critical thinking. So teachable intelligence is just taking all of the pieces that we know of that we use in IQ testing, all of those pieces, and do a test, teach, retest. And the test is to see where the individual is, just with one simple puzzle or exercise. The teach is if the individual did it incorrectly, giving them a hint as to what they might have missed. And then the retest is to give them another opportunity to do a different question, totally different puzzle, but use the same parameters and see if they learned from their past experience and can come up with the right answer. So that is teachable intelligence.
Yeah, it would be great if you added that into the curriculum at, primary schools so that young kids could learn to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, let's dig into your program a little bit. Can you explain what somebody going through your program would experience and how that looks for a diverse set of individuals?
Certainly. I use context-free puzzles. And that provides the opportunity for a game-like setting. And with games, you can take risks. With games, you can learn from your mistakes. With games, you can experiment. And the puzzles are hierarchically organized. In other words, they start very simple, maybe with one variable, and may go up to as many as 14 variables. And so what we do is you start at one place depending on the individual. For example, my NASA scientist started with 7 variables. A child who has a learning difference or possibly developmental delay, they may start with just one variable, find the same color, the same size, the same shape, the same orientation. And we also develop visual imagery skills. Visual imagery skills are what you need to become an artist. You see pictures in your head. This is a sample of a 13-year-old who came to me, and this is how she drew when she was 13. Can you see these?
Yeah, maybe move them a little closer to the screen.
Sure. Here?
Yeah, that's good.
Good?
Yeah,
Okay.
it is. Great.
Okay. So this is how, this is over a 10-month period, 17 hours of intervention. This is what she did. Am I missing one? Let me just make sure that I don't. I have so many, but I want you to get a sense of how she developed. And then, aha, the squirrel. This wonderful squirrel that I couldn't even believe. And after the squirrel, this fabulous man who was created with words. And then this wonderful winter scene.
That's amazing, Dr. Markus. And remind us again, over what time period?
10 months.
10 months.
10 months, 17 hours of intervention. That means 17 hours of my treatment. That does not mean that she didn't have independent work to do at home. So she learned how to look at things differently, how to see perspectives. Her perspective changed. Negative and positive space altered. Depth perception changed. And so I never taught drawing. I didn't do anything with drawing. I've had some of my athletes say, oh, I'm playing the best basketball I ever played. Well, there's no way I dribbled with these varsity players. So what happens is when you change the brain, you really change someone's life. And they can use the skills that they learn in the program with puzzles to apply it to all different domains.
Yeah, that's just phenomenal. Thank you for sharing those. I really think that illustrates the impact of your program. We talked a little bit earlier in the introduction about NASA, your work with NASA. I'm a huge fan of NASA. Can you highlight maybe some of the work you've done with high functioning individuals and some of the impacts that you made there?
Yes. the opportunity I had at NASA was absolutely wonderful. This was the first time that I was able to have a group for one day, 8 hours every other week. And we did a 72-hour program. And when we did the program, every time we began the program, I would start it by saying, has anyone had the opportunity to experience a change in their personal or professional life that is a result of some of the work that we're doing here? And individuals would say, oh, my wife said that I'm much easier to talk to. My secretary commented that I give better instructions. My teenager said, Dad, you're more tolerant than you've ever been. And all of these little comments were, of course, very important. And then one day, one of the scientists came up to me. He stood up and he said, are you going to ask the question today? And I said, of course. Does anyone have anything that they want to share that illustrates that the program has had an effect on their critical thinking or on their communication skills? And he brings up this large binder, must have been about this thick. And he said, do you know there's a catalog of stars? And I was a little embarrassed, but I said, no, I didn't know there was a catalog of stars. And he was head of computer science and engineering, and he was in charge of the satellites that took pictures of the solar system from three or four different locations. And he said he rewrote the code based on our work with the dots. And I just cried. I was so excited to hear that I had had that kind of impact on this individual, on the program, the space program. And when there was a person, Dr. Harold Segal, and he was the individual that was asked to look at DSM exercises, Designs for Strong Minds. And the big carrot at NASA for me, to be honest with you, was that they said that if the program did as I had advertised, that it would affect critical thinking, then they would be willing to and interested in putting it on interactive computer for every school age child. And that really was what I was so committed to. Now, this was in 1998, and this is what Dr. Segal wrote. DSM participants' verbal comments were overwhelmingly positive. Numerous participants reported that the training influenced their thinking. Specifically, they indicated they learned to consider perspective and points of view different from their own, that they had become more open-minded and more likely to think about alternative understandings, that they had become more analytical and objective. The vast majority of participants expressed interest in pursuing further DSM training in critical thinking. Nearly 90% of the participants said they would recommend the training to others. Most, 83%, said they would like to see DSM automated on their desktop computers. Thus, the anecdotal data obtained in response to DSM training was very positive. Now, of course, none of us could have predicted 9/11. And we all know what happened with funding after that horrible incident. So we weren't able to put it on interactive computer, but I still have all my NASA tapes. They taped me during every session for the computer scientists. Maybe someday we'll be able to do it.
Yeah, maybe someday. I hope so. And I guess I'll never look at the stars now without thinking about your work because since you've had a hand in coding them. Well, let's switch gears just a little bit and go back to Clark Elliott's work and his book, The Ghost in My Brain, detailed a lot of the work that you did with him. Can you walk us through the program that you pulled together for Dr. Elliott, and then maybe highlight some of where he was when he started and then how he progressed?
Professor Elliott, very, very highly intelligent individual. He rode his bicycle at 10 to Berkeley to audit physics and calculus. He's an accomplished musician. He had a car accident, and the car accident totally altered his sensory input, his visual, auditory, and motor control, even though it was not a big accident. $1,200, I think, damage to the back of his car, which isn't an excessive amount. But I did not see Clark Elliott for 8 years. I saw him 8 years after his accident. And the good news about the brain is it's plastic and modifiable. The bad news about the brain is it's plastic and modifiable. And you do develop different habits and different patterns of behavior. The wonderful thing about Clark Elliott was that he remembered. He knew who he was before and wanted to go to that person again. He had been to leading universities. He had had many neuropsychs. He had seen neurologists who published with letters. And when he came to my office, it's my job to look at someone and to see or to find what everyone else missed, almost like a detective, almost like a Clouseau. You know, what could be causing this change in behavior, and how can we fix it? Now, prior to working with me, Clark had what we would call attention deficit disorder. He was a bit hyperactive and had a difficult time concentrating unless he wanted to do what he was doing. In other words, he was in flow. If he loved his work or he loved the assignment, he could concentrate for hours, but it was difficult for him to get himself to do that which he least liked to do. And I worked with Clark about 8 months to a year. And he claims now he can do well that which he least likes to do. And that's really my gauge. What everyone likes to do, where you find flow and pleasure, whether it's on the basketball court or dancing, cooking, drawing, reading, or doing math, whatever is your pleasure, you don't need me for. What you need me for are those tasks, those chores that you don't want to do. Clean the garage. If you're in mathematics, a lot of people who are in math don't like to read and don't like to write. A lot of people who focus on reading and writing don't like math. So I always tell people that if I can get you to do well that which you least like to do, we've changed your brain. And that's what happened with Clark. He was able to, he was very diligent, and he did try and alter what I was doing. And I would say to him, Clark, you may be right. You're very smart, but I know this other way works. So we just have to do it this way. I just want it to work for you as quickly as possible. And so he was able to regain, and as he says, what he purports is that he is even more accomplished now than he was prior to the accident.
One of the things that always impresses me about your work is the diversity of neurological challenges that you're able to work with. Is there a test or some way individuals could determine whether their specific situation is a good fit for your program?
Well, most people who come to see me come with a concern. Sometimes they're trying to get into law school and they cannot, they have a very difficult time with the games, the inductive and deductive reasoning. Sometimes they're trying to get into medical school and one part of the test is particularly challenging. There are many students that I see who are not accomplished in mathematics. They get into third or fourth grade and their parent begins to appreciate that multiplication is not within their capabilities. They don't really understand numbers. I don't know if there's a specific test. I have worked with engineers. I've worked with entrepreneurs who have sold their company, who want to go back to school and get a degree in something else. So they want to sharpen up their brain. It's much like taking an exercise class. It's very similar to learning a new sport. It helps if there's motivation to want to change. If someone says, math has always been a struggle for me, and now I have this new position, and there are a lot of numbers on, that I have to deal with, or I go to a conference and I don't understand everything, then they come to see me. And some people, like some of us who, take a yoga class, we just want to be the best we can be. So we want to increase our intellectual potential, catalyze creativity. We just want to grow.
That's certainly relevant for me as I start to age a little bit. I think I could use a little tune up here and there. What about the iPad applications that you've developed? I know you treat patients in your office in Chicago, but you've got 9 digital apps and I think more underway. You want to share a little information about those and who they're appropriate for?
Certainly. On my website, you can learn about all of the apps, and it's very specific. I have spoken on YouTube about most of the applications and how they help. There are apps for working memory. There's an aging brain boost app for individuals who are feeling that they're walking into the kitchen and not remembering what they were going in there for, or they're not tasking in transition. They're not able to do something and then stop and do something else, go from transitioning from one activity to another. And there's an app for that. There's visual imagery applications, and visual imagery is very important to memory. Visual imagery and is very important to creativity. And so you can learn about the different apps and see which one seems to meet your needs. So and it's very similar to doing crossword puzzles or doing Sudoku, but it is more targeted to critical thinking and catalyzing creativity.
Well, Dr. Markus, I know you've always got some sort of iron in the fire because I don't believe you sleep very much. But what's new with Designs for Strong Minds? What are you doing next to help scale your business and increase intelligence?
Well, I'm working on some more apps. I'm working on an app to help students who have a difficult time with abstract thinking. to go from the concrete to the abstract. And I'm working on an app with functions, symbols that are abstract, that indicate different changes in images. And these are important because if you have an opportunity to look at something and to see what no one else sees, there's a pleasure that you derive from this intrinsic motivation to find a way to fix it, to find a way to communicate differently, to find a way to organize information in a new way. And so I'm working on these two apps. And of course, speaking to groups like yours, creating more exercises when the need arises. I mean, I do have 18,000 instruments, paper and pencil instruments, so I have quite a bit, but I always come up with new ideas and sit down at the drawing board when the need presents itself.
Great. Well, I think that's about to wrap it up today, Dr. Markus. Thank you so much for sharing what you've been working on. And should individuals interested in your work reach out to you, or should they start with an app and go from there?
You know what I think? I think they should spend a little time on my website. Listen to what I have to say. They can read some of the testimonials. They can read some things that other people have written about me. They can look at the applications. And that's a place to start. And then certainly they're welcome to phone. I have a wonderful assistant, Margaret, who has been with me for 10 years, and she can answer most of their questions, and she's available day and night.
Okay. And that website is designsforstrongminds.com, and it's just no spaces in between, Designs for Strong Minds, correct?
Right. And if my iPad applications, I believe now we have recategorized them under Donalee Markus. So you can look those up at the App Store as well.
Okay, great, great. Well, I think that is going to sum it up for us today. Is there anything you'd like to leave as a closing statement for our audience?
Well, I think that cognitive restructuring is the science of hope. Moving individuals from passive recipients of information to active generators of ideas is what Designs for Strong Minds is all about.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Markus. We enjoyed talking with you today. And in addition to this interview, we've got a couple of video clips that Dr. Markus has put together that will be attached on to the end of the interview, just to go into a little bit more detail about the puzzles. And as she mentioned, you can find most of that on her website. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.